We are back. It is crazy. Israel and the U.S. just have to run. So there's a bunch of stuff going on.
It's called Connecting, and it's insane. I don't do schedules or timesheets manually anymore. I work with the school, with American support.
Mass launches. I mean, remember, we initiated this campaign, the PJAC, the Kurds, the Baluch, and others. But we took too long. Air defense that you're dodging around, all updated. This takes time, so it's not like it's not a computer game where click, point, they're dead. It takes a while to develop these targets. And if the Iranians were, then you've got nothing. And the Iranians now, we'll see. Because I think, again, my guess is that we're trying to make it as difficult as possible for the Iranians to launch ballistic missiles right now. This is why we brought in the Wild Weasel squadrons and a lot of tactical aircraft. Why do we have 12 A-10s? Probably because they're supporting special operation forces on the ground. We're trying to hunt down Iranian missiles. So we may not see the massive launches of Iranian missiles right now because they may be suppressed. We'll see. I don't know. What's going to happen is eventually we're going to run out of resources.
Yeah,
And the Iranians,
Israel has some defense as well. The air defense army as well. Relatively limited in Israel. You said this operation will fail. If the goal is regime change, and I would agree with that it is regime change, how can they achieve it? Is the US going to try to incite protests like we saw a few months ago? Or could we see special ops on the ground in Iran try to help with the overthrow?
first of all, we have to check about the role played by special operations forces. They're good, but they're not perfect. We'll go off the game plan that appeared to be in play in late December, early January, where Scott Bessent bragged at the World Economic Forum about triggering a economic crisis, a collapse of the real, dollar shortage, etc. But that was triggering a crisis in peacetime. I just think people need to understand what's happening. Iran's a war right now. So it really doesn't matter what the exchange rate of real is, because the economy is normal, nothing's normal right now. So, already we have a disjointed plan. Because the original plan was to have an economic crisis that created legitimate protests in the street. And then the Mossad, and we saw this. The protest began December 28th. On December 30th, the Mossad comes out with Farsi language social media and says, we are with you on the ground. And after that, all the other Western-controlled, opposition entities start coming out, and we see the peaceful demonstrations transition into violent demonstrations. Deliberate targeted violence by these cells designed to promote an Iranian reaction from the security forces that would then be captured by these various entities inside Iran and broadcast out to be echoed by an entire chamber of useful idiots who start saying tens of thousands dead, 20,000 dead, 30,000, all made up. There were about 3,000 dead. Many of them were security forces. A lot of them were killed by the Mossad and other guys just to create violence. But this is what happens. Echo chamber that creates this justification for response that led to President Trump saying help is on the way. But help wasn't on the way. We didn't pull the trigger because the military said we don't have the resources to accomplish the mission. So we had to hit pause, then we had to flow in air defense, then we had to flow in military capability, and now we are supposed to have enough pieces on the ground, but you can't restart. What we started back in December and January. We tried. We saw the universities around the country, saw demonstrations coming out here, bringing up their monolithist flags and all this kind of stuff. you're not gonna get that. So the regime change is supposed to be predicated upon popular uprising. Basically, people rising in the streets, suppression of leadership, suppression of security forces that lead to chaos, anarchy, and then the paramilitaries are coming in, PJAK, Kurds, the Baluch, and others. But we took too long. And again, Scott Ritter knows this. So does the Iranian leadership, so does the Iranian security forces who are deployed, taking proactive measures. So all the things that have to happen to achieve regime change, economic crisis, popular uprising, suppression, decapitation, other forces coming in, they're all out of whack. It's just not going to work.
And what you described as well is no longer just a clean regime change. You're talking about a full-blown civil war. You have all these separatist groups that are moving in. What about Iran's retaliation? We heard news days where that Iran was firing supersonic airship missiles from China. China sent a lot of drones to Iran as well. Suicide drones at scale. I'm not sure how they were delivered. What are Iran's capabilities today to go to a 12-war war?
I mean, you can receive weapons, but if you haven't trained on them, if you haven't exercised them, if you haven't put the whole support network in place, it's meaningless. So Iran had tremendous capabilities until 12-day war. That was a very limited conflict. Again, American players have been following this, and as I said, I believe right now the American contribution isn't creating billowing clouds of dust in Iran, but we are suppressing the Iranian retaliatory capability. I believe as we speak, American aircraft are bombing missile sites to prevent missiles from being launched against aircraft carriers, seizing control of Iranian airspace over missile operating areas so that if Iranians bring the missiles out, we bomb them and we kill them. This is what we're doing right now. So we'll see what their retaliatory capability. But if anybody thought we were just going to bomb Iran and then sit there and let the Iranians bring all their toys out and fire at us on terms set for the Iranians, then they don't know what war is. This is an operation operated at a different scope of scale. The United States is bringing in a level of firepower that has never been seen before in terms of its concentration and its lethality. So we may not see the waves of Iranian missiles that we saw last time. There may be a phase of combat where we get some leakers, but you're looking at a war of attrition between the U.S. Air Force and the Iranian Missile Command as we maneuver. But the goal here for Iranians is for us to run out of ammunition, and then they'll start throwing the waves. So that's what my guess would be, is that we'll see the waves of missiles later in this conflict as we lose our ability to control airspace because we have a finite number of resources. If Iran can wait this out, and if they can make us expend resources, and again, we're behind the power curve because we didn't achieve regime change. And so
ballistic missiles reports that are detected heading towards Israel, so Iran may be retaliating as we speak.
Yeah, how many though?
Just came in last, I'm not sure how many. Before we get more information on this response from Iran, I'll get the introduction to play a clip from Trump if it's easy to get your thoughts on it. And a few statements on it. Trump said Americans may be lost and we may have casualties. We will destroy the ground from the brutal regime. Go ahead, KK.
Military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and innocent people in many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back the violent takeover of the U.S. embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the
Ranger knows that if your school custodian, cleanliness is your top priority. That's why you can rely on Ranger for a range of cleaning equipment, from disinfectants to floor scrubbers. Ranger, for the ones get it done.
They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to...
I think it's a clip of justification that makes some sense. And I thought, I started having hopes yesterday. I think the Omanian Foreign Minister said yesterday that Iran was willing to give up the nuclear material and send it to the US. Now, I'm not sure that was confirmed, but that was last time I went to read about maybe it's either we delay the war or have a way out. And here we are, hours later, the war has begun. Your thoughts on not much to comment on what Trump has said. It's very clear that he's trying to justify the war, which doesn't make sense in American interests. What I'm more interested in is how Iran will reply, how ready Israel is, and whether they will target US bases from the get-go or they'll target Israel. So what will be a better strategy for Iran?
Well, again, I think we I'm comfortable to be speaking on behalf of Iran because I can't. I'm not going to. I'm not pro-Iranian. I'm a neutral observer. But the Iranians have said that this fight may be existential in nature this time. They said it will be different than the 12-Day War. We know that the Iranians were very restrained during the 12-Day War. That they could have done much worse to Israel, and they didn't. And again, look at their approach to striking the Al-Udeid Air Base. Notification, firing order missiles, only one or two modern missiles came in, and they just did a symbolic destruction of a multi-million-dollar radar. This time they say it's going to be different, very different, and then that they're going to bring real harm to both Israel and the United States. They made it clear from the start that no matter how this war started, Israel will be held to account. And so I think Israel will be one of the primary targets for the Iranians. We may not have to see the mass missiles. Last time, they fired a lot of missiles that was part of their strategy of depletion of air defense. But what they learned is you can penetrate these with modern missiles. So we may see some of the modern missiles up front. So you don't have to have massive launches. Because again, if I'm a military player, I'm not going to let you do mass launches. I mean, remember, we initiated this campaign, the United States and Israel. That means we determine where the priorities are. We're not reacting to them, they're reacting to us. And so having done the assessments of where these missile launches take place from in terms of the mass missiles, we should be having airplanes flying over, helicopters flying over, A-10s roaming the desert, looking for missile launches. So if they're going to retaliate against Israel, I don't think they're going to be seeing the massive waves of missiles. You're going to be seeing one or two, three or 5 or 6 modern missiles that are designed to penetrate the air defense. But no matter what, if this is an existential conflict, then there's no time, right, Mario? Because this fight is to the death. Now, if I'm a championship boxer, do I try to knock you out in the first round, or recognize this 15-round fight? And I might concede for 4 rounds to let you tire your arms out. But when we come down to round 10, round 11, round 12, and I'm still standing tired, your hands start dropping. The knockout bill comes. The Iranians have said this is an existential fight. So I think we need to understand they're not going to stop. This is not going to be stopped by Donald Trump picking up the phone saying, hey, let me run a symbolic midnight air run, and you hit us, and the war comes to an end. This is the death of Iran with the death of Israel. That's it.
Are US forces ready for swarm tactics by Iran? Now, the sea drones, the air drones, the warships, if you have hundreds of these drones going towards the Lincoln, for example, how are military capabilities, American capabilities against that? Also look at the ballistic missile side of the warships, putting aside Israel and US bases. Is that a threat? US can we see a warship get hit and potentially severely damaged?
Well, absolutely, but again, Mario, we start this fight. So the way we start this fight is to say, we're going to give you every opportunity to launch a mass strike against our ships and put us in harm. We start this fight by saying, you ain't going to launch anything. What do you think we're doing right now? We're blowing up all their launch facilities. We're seeking to suppress their ability to launch. We have aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln out there. We really think we're going to give the Iranians the opportunity to fire missiles that are disruptive of launch and recover operations. No. We are blowing the crap out of everything. That's what we're doing. Now, the Iranians should be smart, which means, let us expend ammunition, which the Iranians know as the statements in general, we have a limited quantity of. So we're going to sit there and suppress. And then we're going to start threatening our I'm guessing this is an Iran ballistic missile heading towards Israel, which was Iran's retaliation. As you said, we will not see the same volume of ballistic missiles we saw in the previous war, as this is a war of attrition. This is over Iraq right now, and over some cases over Iraq. From the team. Now, back to the Iranian response, Scott. I made a post earlier you might disagree with it. I said this will not be World War III. Hezbollah said they will not join, as I said earlier, the limited strike by the US, making it clear it's not going to be a limited strike. How active do you think it will be? Do you think it could become a regional war and what other countries could involve? What would be the role of Russia and China? Could they be more involved this time around than during the 12-Day War? Well, let's start with Hezbollah. My understanding is before the 50 cruise missiles were fired against Iran, that the first strike were actually a very concentrated series of strikes against Lebanon to suppress Hezbollah. And then they launched the attack. I think Hezbollah will be getting involved. This is a limited strike. This is existential, which means Hezbollah understands if the Iranian regime goes down, they go down. So there's no longer restraint. Hezbollah has never fought Israel unrestrained. Now we're talking about literally a life and death struggle for Hezbollah. So I think you can see the gloves come off. I wouldn't be surprised if Hamas did the same thing. They just said, screw it, we're going in, all in. Nasrallah said the same thing. They will not only resume attacks against Israel, but they're going to seek to strike American targets in the region. Do we have military force for that? Are we ready to resume operations against Yemen? Does Israel have the ability to divert military resources from this now campaign they're committed to in Israel to Yemen, or is Nasrallah to have more free reign to target things? But this will be a regional conflict, and then we're, the Iranians have always threatened that they have the ability to do X, Y, and Z. Are they going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz? Because if this is an existential struggle, it should be shut down right now. Are they going to strike Saudi airfields are being used right now to support this war? Will they strike Saudi oil fields? Because that'd be the first thing I do. I wouldn't say I'd dismiss Israel, but I'd start taking out Saudi oil fields. I'd start taking out Azerbaijan oil fields. I'd start taking out all the oil fields in the region up front. Because the only way you're going to get the United States to pull back is when the economy collapses. And that will be the eventual outcome. But because we're not going to achieve what we wanted. We didn't get the big boys. There are a lot, which means the Iranians are falling back on pre-planned, pre-planned actions. This will be a long, drawn-out fight for them. This war won't end with Iran saying we surrender. This war either ends with, Kurdish and Baluch pickup trucks running through Tehran, firing guns in the air as they take over the regime, or this ends with the destruction of Israel.
So in your mind, this is exactly a regime change operation. It is not pressure to get Iran to hold on negotiations.
It's not in my mind. Israel has come out and said it.
Trump said it for you just now. President Trump calls on Iranians to rise up and overthrow the regime. They just came out the regime. The government. So we are going to do a regime change operation, which I don't think even people that hate the regime, me included, don't understand how damaging this will be, not only for Iran, but the entire region. That's why Gulf nations didn't want to see this war. That's why other U.S. allies didn't want to see this war. We talked about an escalation ladder. Now we know one military strategist was talking about how the U.S. will continue escalating until Iran falls on the negotiating table, but we're talking about a regime change operation. This won't be applicable. If this does become existential, we have an escalation ladder on the Iranian side. And he talked about striking Saudi and Azerbaijani oil fields and closing the Strait of Hormuz. That would be probably the most damaging thing Iran could do to the American economy to work in their advantage. So what would be the strategy on the Iranian side? Is it just slowing it as much as possible? And what would it take for them to start escalating? Is it being able to strike the supreme leader? And also, if you strike the supreme leader, if you get him, what happens to Iranian leadership? Could they continue functioning without the supreme leader and president? And these are strikes from Israel, by the way, now Scotland started Team Mississippi.
Welcome to war. I had a really good game. We're going to see a lot more. This is going to become commonplace, and you kick the hornet's nest, you're going to get stoned. We know that they tried to kill the Supreme Leader because his residence has been destroyed. It was one of the first struck. We know they tried to kill the Iranian president because his presidential palace has been destroyed. The defense minister has been tried to. They may have gotten. We don't know. I mean, we remember the 12-day war. They killed everybody until it turned out they really did kill everybody. A lot of them were alive. But the Iranians, the Supreme Leader, has said, "I'm a dead man. I accept this. And when you kill me, we will get a new Supreme Leader." See, people don't understand that. This Iranian regime is a constitutional government. It's not a simplistic dictatorship the way it's sold in the West. It's a very complex, democratically based government. The Assembly of Experts is one of these panels in Iran that's responsible for monitoring the work of the Supreme Leader. People think he's the Supreme Leader and anything he wants. That's not true. He's the Supreme Leader who has to carry out his actions in accordance with the Constitution and in accordance with Islamic jurisprudence. And if the Supreme Leader ever loses the ability to function in that regard, he can be removed by the Assembly of Experts, which is democratically elected by the way. But they're also responsible for having a list of people to replace the Supreme Leader instantly. So they know if the Supreme Leader is killed or incapacitated, they know automatically who they're going to pick, and it goes on and on. So there will be no decapitation until the regime falls. There's no such thing as decapitating and watching around like with your heads cut off. It's the same thing with the president. Iran has a constitution. Now, I know many people in the West don't want to respect that, and they denigrate the Iranian people, they don't call them. It's the most functionally effective democracy in the Middle East, other than maybe Israel. It's a genuine democracy. Pardon?
I
don't know. Lebanon's got some issues. You can't be a real democracy if your government has already dictated how much percentage is going to be Christian, Sunni, and Shia. So you've already imprinted some sort of control over it. But the Iranians already function in democracy. The West, we need to, because what that means is that this country that's been around for 47 years, as the President has said, it functions based upon the rule of law. It functions based upon, it's not on the whim of individuals. It's a system that has been around for a long time, and this system is sustainable. The Iranians have been preparing for an American war of excessive proportions since Dick Cheney first threatened it back in 2005. That's when the Iranians woke up and said we need to divide our country into 12 autonomous military districts, each one capable of sustaining a fight on its own in case they lose contact with Tehran. Well, that's what we have today. So there will be no regime change. This was predictable. I mean, anybody who knows anything about Iran knows this was the case. You can't change the regime.
If there's going to be a regime change, that's the goal of US and Israel. What's the end result?
Well, from the Iranian perspective, the end result would be that Tel Aviv would look like Gaza.
Just talk about regime change. Netanyahu said the same thing. Our joint action will create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. Now, I said from the beginning, if this is the strategy to pressure Iran to fold on the negotiating table and succeed, then it may succeed. If this is a regime change operation, this is likely going to end up in a complete bloodbath.
Let's look at this. All the demonstrations that took place in December paled in size to pro-government demonstrations. That's always been the case. They've never had opposition demonstration get out of the streets and everybody go, oh my God, that's the biggest thing we've ever seen. This is people who are opposed to the regime. But the vast majority of the Iranian people, support the Iranian regime. And that's why this call for the people of Iran to rise up, it's stupidity personified. It means the people making that call have fallen victim to their own propaganda. We're going to find out just how much people in Iran are willing to sacrifice to defend the Islamic Republic of Iran. There is no support in Iran for the return of the monarchy. So this wet dream of having, raise a letter and come back in and take his father's position. No. And all these minority groups, the Kurds, the Lala, the Azeri, they don't have the ability to launch a decapitation strike on their own. This is a fantasy that's premised on people rising up, the leadership being decapitated, security forces being suppressed, and the people taking control. You hear it, that's what their words are. It's not going to happen.
Even if that happens, I don't think people understand that. Let's say it does happen, they achieve their objective. It's not as simple. There is no strong opposition leader. I don't think the regime is that popular in Iran. You say it's very popular. It's hard to really confirm 100%. But even if it's not popular, let's say it's not popular, there is no immediate opposition figure that can take charge. So if the regime does fall, you've just got a country with all these different groups that are trying to separate from Iran, and that's what leads to civil war down to silence on Bahrain. Sorry, Scott, we have silence right now, but Portugal initial reports of silence at US base in Bahrain. So could you say that's US base?
That'd be the end of the fleet. So, yay, Bahar. I mean, look, Mario, this is going to happen all day long. As we're going to start to see the Iranians retaliate. And as I said, we're in a campaign mode now. This is not going to be a 3 to 5 day war. Right now, people are talking about 4 days of intensive strike. And Iran is 4 times bigger than Iraq. And we launched, I participated in a major conflict that had a strategic campaign component against Iraq back in 1991. I also then went back to Iraq for 4 years as a weapons inspector in the first couple of years.
Yeah, this is gonna get nasty.
Visiting destroyed, facilities, seeing what we
This war is gonna get nasty.
One thing I was told by a senior Iraqi official is, you guys are really good at blowing up empty buildings, and we're really good at pouring concrete. But you didn't get the critical material, the critical chemicals, etc. Iran's been preparing for this attack. Their leadership has been taken to alternative sites. When I visited Iran back in 2005, I had a Revolutionary Guard minder. We were having conversations, and he said, why don't you go to this square in Tehran at this time, and then just come back and tell me what you saw. And I went, and I looked, I came back, and I saw some North Koreans. He said, why do you think they're here? He said, who do you think dug the tunnels for Hezbollah in Lebanon? The same people that dug the tunnels in the mountains north of Seoul, Korea, where all the North Korean artillery pieces are sequestered. And they've been digging non-stop since 2005. Mashhad has an underground city where the government can relocate. Outside of Tehran, underground. They've been going underground. The Iranians are underground right now. We don't have the capacity to beat these people. If you're going to do a decapitation strike, you don't spend an entire month talking about how you're going to do a decapitation strike. One of the biggest mistakes that was made wasn't pulling the trigger in January. We would have better success if we pulled the trigger in January, but we stopped. January 17th. And what day is it today? February 28th? So we've given them well over a month, almost a month and a half, for the Iranians to go into war mode. And I just don't think people respect the Iranians enough and understand what they've been preparing for. This decapitation strike didn't decapitate. And again, I just want to reemphasize this point, because people who don't know war shouldn't be engaged in discussions of war. This war is predicated. You have sequences of things that are supposed to happen. And as they happen, you have resources. We have a finite amount of resources. So we have squadrons that have certain capabilities. We have submarines with certain capabilities. And we take these capabilities and we apply them to a target set. And then as we suppress that target set, we can reallocate these resources onto the next phase. But what happens is if you fail to achieve the results you want, those resources don't get reallocated, they get reinforced. And so we start taking resources that should be doing this over here, we have to pull away. This happened during Desert Storm. When we thought we were going to interdict Iraqi Scud missiles in the west, we put a whole bunch of F-15 squadrons up front on that problem set, and we failed. And the Iraqis kept launching against Israel. So now those F-15s, which were supposed to be moving and carrying out critical strikes, had to remain and get reinforced. And we diverted resources from the rest of the conflict to move on a new war that was developing. This is what's happening right now. Just telling you, I can tell you what's happening in CENTCOM right now. Guys are calling up going, we didn't achieve phase 1 results. They go, well, we got to reinforce. Where are we going to get those? Well, we're going to have to degrade our planned attack on this, and have to put those resources here, and now the intelligence, because this is all. Now we're back?
Yeah, we're back. We are getting reports. As you said, the Houthis will join. Well, we have reports now of al-Nusra sending missiles from Yemen, obviously toward Israel. We also have reports from multiple sources that there is a hit in Tel Aviv. You talked about this, making priorities for the war in Iraq. What weapons do you think Iran will use? Because we've had reports before this war started that Iran was buying a lot of attack helicopters from Russia. Not sure if you've seen this. Not sure what the purpose of these would be. Is there any other new weaponry that Iran would purchase from China and Russia that they didn't have back in the 12-day war? So what would be different now from the 12-day war? And also, if you can make more comparisons to what we saw in Iraq, for people that were following that war, you could see the similarities here.
We're talking about these helicopters. What would the helicopters be used for? not to attack Israel, we will attack outside of Iran's borders. We'll just rely on history. During the Gulf War, we, the United States, deployed special operations forces into Western Iraq together with the British. It was what we called Delta Force. And there was a battle that took place around February 14th, Valentine's Day, where a half squadron reinforced troop was dug in, and the Iraqis started coming after them with helicopters. And the helicopters were on line, they were moving forward, deploying troops, moving forward. And this was very problematic for the Delta guys who boxed it. And so they had to start maneuvering out of this. And then F-15s came in, and there's a famous case where the guy dropped a 2,000-pound bomb and it hit one of the Iraqi helicopters and blew it up. And then that broke the Iraqi helicopter assault, and they had to disperse and run for their lives, and the Delta guys were able to escape. Literally, I think that's what these new helicopters were. If you're planning, if I'm the Iraqi or the Iranians, and I'm saying, how are they going to suppress my missiles? Because you have to think like this. So what is the enemy going to do? You have to assume there's going to be special operations forces operating on the ground inside Iran. So you want the most capable helicopters out there hunting these forces down. And I think that's what these advanced Russian helicopters are designed to do, to work with.
They've already had ground forces, at least special ops, being on the ground in Iran. So that's what I want to respect them for.
I believe so. It'd be stupid not to. It'd be very stupid not to. So we may not, see the effectiveness of this, if you study the history of American Delta Force operation once in Iraq, with all due respect to the Delta guys, every time you inserted, you were running for your lives because you were detected the moment you sat down, and you're running. You were never able to carry out the campaign you wanted to carry out. The same thing with the British. The SAS went in there, and within a week and a half, they basically had lost contact with the bulk of the SAS troops deployed, and were feared that most of them were dead or captured. It turns out that they were just running. And we have the element of surprise. If we put special operations forces on the ground, I think they're going to spend far more time running than they are going to be hurting. That's just what history suggests. And the Iranians should have been preparing for this up front. Now, go ahead.
I was going to ask about the one was talking about targeting aircraft carriers. Do you think they could even sink an aircraft carrier, or that's wishful thinking? How some of the uses of these aircraft carriers? Now, my thoughts would be wishful thinking. The US would not put the aircraft carriers in a position where they could be sunk. If I'm wrong, let me know.
Well, I mean, obviously we don't want to put a carrier in a position or stuff, but Mario, let me just remind you that, I forget the name of the carrier, but there was a carrier operating in the operations against, in the Red Sea against Yemen. They had to carry out an emergency evasive maneuver so extreme that it threw an F-18 off board. You remember that? Remember that? An American aircraft carrier was in the process of carrying out launch and recovery operations, and because of a Yemeni attack, had to carry out and the aircraft carrier had to carry out an emergency evasive maneuver that was so extreme that it threw an F-18 off the deck of the ship. So clearly, our aircraft carriers can be put at risk. If you hit an aircraft carrier, you can sink an aircraft carrier, depending on what you hit. Now, I saw you put a post up there about CIFS, close-in fire suppression system. Mark, it's been around forever. It doesn't work. All right? It's never been fully tested, but it doesn't work when it's hypersonics. And so if the Iranians were able to get hypersonic maneuvering warhead in the vicinity of an aircraft carrier, it will hit the aircraft carrier. So this is why we put such an emphasis on suppression up front. what we need to do is deny the Iranians the ability to salvo launch this missile. If you run a leaker at the United States, we're going to shoot it down. There's no doubt about it. So no matter how advanced, you can get that most advanced Chinese weapon in the world. We're going to shoot it down. With overlaying their capabilities, we're going to get it. What you need to do is you have to fire an opening salvo that's designed to overwhelm our air defense capabilities. Start getting the radars to lock in. There's only so many targets they can track at once. Start to communicate. Start deciding which munitions to fire, position themselves, and so now you start getting that chaotic factor in there.
1/8 plus 1/8 equals 1/4. 1/2 is bigger than 1/3, and 1/3 is bigger than 1/4. 1/2 is the same as 2 1/4 or 3 1/6. This is the magnetic fraction playbook, perfect for little kids learning fractions.
Sonic maneuvering, and we won't be able to adjust to it. They'll hit ships. But this requires the Iranians to be able to carry out this kind of sequenced attack. And our job, the air wing commander's job, is to disrupt that. We're not going to let them be able to carry out these sequenced attacks. The problem is, we're going to run out of ammunition. That's the problem. That's the fatal flaw in this entire plan. Because there will come a point where the aircraft we start sending over won't have bombs. And when that happens, the Iranians come out of the hunker down position they're in, and they begin the sequence attacks. And that's where I don't think we're going to carry it up front. But when this war drags on and on and on, and we start running out of ammunition, say in about a week and a half, that's where the window of vulnerability comes in. And that's what I believe the generals are telling the president, that we can, if we have unlimited ammunition, we can win this war.
We were talking about American ammunition being short, being depleted a year ago now, Scott, with the Ukraine war and all the support there. And now we're talking about a new massive war with Iran. While you're speaking as well, the Houthis announced they will begin attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Is there certain, I know it sounds like a silly question now, but is there certain red lines? Every war, if you do this, we do that. So is there anything specific that if the US crosses that line, you might see Iran strike Gulf nations, Dubai, the UAE, Saudi, or beyond military bases, beyond US military bases? So I feel like there's an escalation ladder on the Iranian side where we'll strike Israel, the Houthis attack ships in the Red Sea. Then we'll start striking US bases. Then we might start striking Gulf interests in the region, including oil fields. And then the last line that Iran could cross, the biggest escalation that they could achieve is trying to close the Strait of Hormuz, which would cripple their economy, but also cripple the global economy. So is there a certain tic-tac that we can see in this war?
Again, I have to go with what the Iranians said. This isn't going to be a sequential escalation. This is an existential fight that began now. All the statements coming from the Ministry of Defense is, it's on. The game is on. And so therefore now the Iranians will operate on their timetable. They have a plan. That's what no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. Our plan has already failed. We didn't achieve regime change. So now, and then the other thing again,
because the decapitation strike did not achieve, it did not eliminate the targets that were targeted. But if you plot their roles a lot faster, we'll get names within the first few hours of getting names of people that were hit, and most of them were killed. In this case, Iran seems to be a lot more prepared, but the decapitation strike did not succeed like we saw in the 12th War, and that will slow whatever time the US and Israel have.
because if again, I'm just reading into the president's statements and the statements by the Mossad that have come out. Regime change is predicated upon the ability of the Iranian people to rise up and remove the regime from power. One of the ways that we wanted to facilitate that is to eliminate the authority of the regime by killing the leadership and then suppressing the security forces that would respond. Do we see in Tehran right now, are you seeing 1 million people out in the streets waving the banner of the monarchy saying Khomeini must die, Khomeini must go?
We see a rally around the flags, we see the complete opposite. Remember the 12-day war, everyone thought we'd see a regime change, then people on the streets. and people, even people that did not like the regime, rallied behind the regime against the regime.
100%.
So opposite of what we saw in January.
We're going to see the entire Iranian nation rally behind the nation of Iran, which is defined by the Islamic Republic. This regime change fantasy has failed, and will fail. And so now the Iranians are going to wage the war that they need to wage. They didn't start this. I just want people to understand that too. They didn't start this. They were working actively to find, as you said, they were putting solutions on the table that would have resolved this nuclear issue altogether. But this was never about the nuclear program. This was never about anything other than regime change. And so now that Israel and the United States have thrown away any pretense and have committed to a regime change operation, this is an existential war of survival for Iran. So there's no reason for them to do anything other than defeat the entities that are arrayed against them. The United States would be the easiest one to defeat, just so people understand, because we don't, the Iranians don't have to defeat the United States militarily, just politically. This is the president just committed political suicide. It's over. It's over. Goodbye. Disregard me. Adios. Whatever.
The longer this lasts, the more US casualties, that's how Iran would win.
But not even with US casualties. A failure to accomplish the task. We could have this war go on and not lose a single soldier and still lose. Because this is a regime change operation, and when it's exposed that we can't change the regime, that we have failed. I mean, Pete Hegseth and his muscle, go bench press another 350 pounds, Pete. That isn't going to help you target Iran more effectively. This is a failure of the Americans. Who knows? We may wake up and find out that they actually killed everybody. Then we change the thing. But right now it doesn't appear that they have. Plus the Iranians have a plan. The United States loses by not winning. The question now is, what about Israel? Because Iran has rightly said that Israel is the root of all evil here. And so Israel has to be punished from the Iranian perspective. So I don't think this is going to be about escalation here, escalation there, escalation here. I think the Iranians are going to have a campaign plan that is going to lead to the physical destruction of Israel. That's their objective. And now that Israel has initiated this fight, there's nothing to stop the Iranians. This isn't going to be, we're going to cross one red line at a time. The red line has been crossed. Israel crossed the red line. So now Iran is in its existential war of survival, which requires them to outlast the United States, leading to the political collapse, the collapse of will. This president's going to be running. We're going to find out what kind of man Donald Trump is. And Mario, did you hear his voice? Did you hear confidence in that voice? Did you hear a scared, fat old man? I heard a scared, fat old man. He wasn't confident. He's just blabbering nonsense. But what happens now in a week or so, he's going to start blaming the military. He's going to blame Joe Biden. Joe Biden broke our military, and we're still paying the consequences of Biden's mismanagement. And he's going to be looking for a way to get out of this war. Iran, you asked before what the role of China and Russia would be. China and Russia have different objectives than Iran. China and Russia are not looking for the physical destruction of Israel. What China and Russia are looking for is political and economic stability. And key to this is the survival of Iran as the Islamic Republic. So China and Russia are going to be playing very big diplomatic games. Their job is to get the United States to end this war, and their job is to get to Iran to agree to terms of conflict resolution. And so you're going to be seeing them do that. All the people that think that Russia and China are going to jump in with 2 feet and start fighting for Iran, that just isn't going to happen. what Russia and China.
We designed these pants to help beer belly men feel good every day, and thanks to all the support. This special sale, we're giving our biggest deal ever, 70% off. Buy one, get two. The only pants for senior men that understand the assignment. They flex.
And on BRICS, and Iran is part of the BRICS. If the United States and Israel are successful in removing the regime, they are successful in removing a nation that is critical to the success of BRICS, Iran. And as I've said in other podcasts, people make fun of me. I don't care. Just I'm confident in my assessment. If Iran falls, Brazil will be next. Saudi Arabia or South America will be next. South Africa. And instead of BRICS, you have BRIC. Russia, India, and China. India is already a flaky player, and BRICS is over. And this is Donald Trump's plan. Donald Trump has been declaring war against BRICS for a long time. So this conflict is being waged on a completely different plane when it comes to Russia and China. They're not into the, how many missiles are striking this, missiles are striking that. They're into how can we bring this conflict down without disrupting the plan of action that they have embarked on in terms of imposing, overlaying a multipolar system over the world, a competition to the West. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot of diplomatic play. They also they're going to be telling the Iranians, don't do the escalation. I mean, the only thing that might save the Saudi Arabian oil fields is a Russian phone call that says, don't do that. Limit this to, military exchange, political exchanges, but do not play the economic debt, because the economic debt card impacts Russia and China as well. And,
Wouldn't Russia benefit though from these lower prices? I don't read to the US taking attention away from Ukraine, so I think Russia would be one of the biggest winners in this war. And the longer it goes on, the better it is for them. How important is it right for them strategically versus weakening the US? Which one's more important to them?
They don't care about weakening the U.S. Russia's not in the business of weakening the U.S. Has never been in the business of weakening the U.S. It's a fabricated fantasy of neocons in the United States.
Even now with the Ukraine war, though, or maybe not before the Ukraine war, the Ukraine war.
They're not in the business of weakening the United States. That's not their strategy. The Ukraine war is about protecting the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine. End of story. Never been about the European fantasy of Russian expansion, imperial Russia. It's been about protecting the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine from the predations of the Western Ukrainian neo-Nazi nationalists. That's all the war is about. We turned it into something else. But Russia would be willing to turn that switch off at any time if they achieve their objectives of protecting the Russian-speaking population. This isn't about a war between Russia and the United States, weakening the United States. We made it a war about weakening Russia. Russia didn't make it a war about weakening us.
What it is, where we are right now is that the main hurdle to a peace deal is their territory. And for
That's not true. That's just not true. The main hurdle to a ceasefire is territory. Russia has never once deviated from its core objectives. This is about NATO. There cannot be NATO in Ukraine at all. There can't be European forces in Ukraine at all. And now we have another thing. People tend to forget that Russia said we will never allow NATO-aligned long-range strike missiles to be based on Ukrainian soil that can strike inside Russia. And yet now we have a British-made Flamingo missile being launched against Vodkinsk and other strategic plants. So this becomes more complicated. This is so much more. The territory issue is just about creating the conditions for a ceasefire, after which the conflict termination things can be resolved. But Russia has never deviated from its core requirement of an absolutely neutral, non-aligned Ukraine. That's what this war is all about.
the NSA base, as we're speaking about now, just got struck, according to a few sources, by at least one ballistic missile.
Imagine that. Where's the theft? Where's the theft? Where's the Arrow 3? Where's the Arrow 4? Where's David Sling? Where's all that? What we're seeing right now is just what I told you. The leakers, the Iranians don't need mass attacks. They have missiles right now individually to defeat everything we put up. There is no missile defense shield over Israel right now. There is no functioning missile defense shield over Israel. It's designed to guard against the mass attack of old drones and old missiles. But the Iranians didn't deploy them during the 12-day war. They had a large stockpile of very advanced missiles, which they began to unveil at the end of the 12-day war. This is what brought Netanyahu to his knees. Because Netanyahu woke up one morning when they just hit 3 of our most top secret sensitive facilities. How the hell did they know about these to begin with? And then they hit them with deadly accuracy. We can't stop them. We have to have this war in now. So Iran is opening with the way they finished the 12-day war. A handful of missiles, strategically important targets.
The team will show footage now from Bahrain, but while they're showing that footage, I want to go back to the point of weakening the US. Because I mean, it's not only Iran that dictates what happens next. I'm not sure if you agree, but China and Russia play a key role as the main funders and supporters of militarily and economically to Iran. Guys, don't understand how Russia does not benefit today, where things stand today, from a weaker US. A weaker US not able to support Ukraine does not allow Ukraine to continue the war. And in terms of the territory not being a sticky issue, Ukraine instead is a sticky issue. Russia says it is non-negotiable. And all parties, I'm not saying it's the only issue, but all parties on the negotiating table said this is non-negotiable. Ukraine does not want to give up the Donbass. Russia said the Donbass for 80 hours. We will not stop until the Donbass becomes part of Russia. And if Ukraine cannot sustain this war with American support, they cannot sustain it with American support. And if America is too stretched thin, as you said, I mean, issues around the globe, I just don't see how Russia does not benefit from this, where things stand today.
When you say benefit, Russia benefits by bringing this war to an end and get its economy back on track. Not a war economy.
A war or Ukraine or Iran war, or both.
Any war. Mario, you're talking to a guy who's visited Russia extensively, and I've spoken with Russians at the highest possible levels, except for the president, of course, I haven't done that. The one thing that Russia says, and again, people have to start listening to the Russians instead of listening to the idiots in the United States. Russia wants stability. The key to Russia's ability to interface with the world is predictability. The antithesis of predictability is chaos. What you're talking about is Russia benefiting from chaos. Russia does not benefit from chaos. Russia is not a generator of chaos. Russia is about stability, predictability. What Russia is looking for in Europe isn't to dominate Europe, but to have well-defined spheres of influence and control that interface in a manner that allows for reduction of tension. So this is why they put draft treaties on the table in December of 2021 to the United States and NATO. Russia's not looking to occupy anything, invade anything. They didn't start the Ukraine conflict. Just remember that. The CIA started Ukraine conflict and for the purpose of creating this chaos. It's the United States that is the generator of chaos. We benefit from chaos. Russia does not. So anybody who thinks that Russia's encouraging all this to happen so that there's chaos and they benefit, you don't understand Russia and how Russia works. Russia does not want this war in the Middle East. Russia would prefer that there is no war, and Russia will work overtime to prevent this war, to reduce it, to end it. Russia didn't start the Ukraine conflict, but it will end in a way, listen to what I said, that ensures there won't be another war in 5 years.
Do you want to know where to invest $1,000 right now? Well, forget about AI, quantum computing, electric vehicles, cryptocurrencies.
Creating a manner that is conducive to that. You can't have Western Ukrainian nationalists governing, supported by Europe and the United States, believing that they're just going to resume this war at any time. You know that's what Zelensky's been saying. You know that's what Duda's been saying. You know that's what Zelensky's saying. They're not looking for an end to this war. They're looking for a temporary ceasefire until which time they can reconstitute capability to begin the fight over again. Russia's not going to allow that to happen. So Russia's not a generator of chaos. Russia is a seeker of stability. And so that's what Russia's goal will be here in the Middle East. Not to create a conflict that weakens the United States, but to bring an end to a conflict that generates chaos and anarchy geopolitically.
Well, Russia does benefit from increased oil prices, and prices will increase if the Strait of Hormuz closes. And the Strait of Hormuz will close if the war drags on, and if Iran sees that as, as a strategy of last.
Russia's not Mario. Again, I'm just telling you, you got to listen to me. Trust me on this one. Russia does not carry out foreign policy designed to influence the price of oil.
Russia
Wants stability in the oil market just like anybody does. Only idiots who play the market want the thing to go up because they hedge, they do this stuff. Ask any West Texas oil man. What do you need more than anything else? Stable oil prices. Why? Because predictability. You're investing, you're putting holes in the ground that are costing you money. Landman, you can get a real quick education on the politics of oil, and instability is devastating for the oil, the people who actually do it. So, no, Russia's not sitting here playing a stupid game to influence oil prices. Russia doesn't do that. First of all, Russia sells half its oil at a steep discount because of sanctions. So, the higher prices go, it just means that Russia gives a greater discount to increase their market viability. But what Russia wants more than anything is for stability so that Russian oil can be sold on the global market at a price that is the equal of all the other prices. Russia is not looking to play this game. This is a Western fantasy. Anybody who speaks about Russia and oil in that way, they don't know anything about Russia or oil.
So then, how long do you think this will last, considering everything you've said so far? I think I'm surprised by your stance on Russia, whether they would benefit or not. I understand China does not want to see this war. Iran doesn't want to see this war, and the US and Israel are seeking regime change. How long do you think this operation will last?
I think what we're going to see is the exhaustion of American military power rapidly, measured in weeks. And that creates a window of political opportunity for Russia and China to work diplomacy behind the scenes and seek an end to this conflict before it becomes the existential burn the house down. They don't want Saudi Arabian oil field struck, Israeli oil field struck, Iranian oil field struck. They want to keep the energy component out of it because both Iran and Russia benefit from energy stability.
They just said Iran just said the US air base at Al-Dhafra, the Emirates has been struck by Iranian ballistic missiles. Just came in now. I'm in the UAE, so this is in the UAE where I am now. US air base at Al-Dhafra, the Emirates has been struck by Iranian ballistic missiles. Just came in now. I'm in the UAE, so this is in the UAE where I am now. So they will usually, I expected it to go through, as I said, escalation battle, strike Israel before striking US bases, but they've gone after US bases from the get-go.
Yeah, they said they would.
Does it surprise you that they went after the bases in UAE and Qatar from the get-go?
No, what surprised me is we're not seeing buildings blow up behind you.
Do you think they could target the city centers of Gulf nations?
Did you take a look at the city center of Tehran?
But you're saying Iran could target, Gulf nations that are trying to convince. So what you're saying, they will target the city centers in order to pressure Gulf nations, to pressure the US to end the war.
What I'm saying is that Iran, this is a war of existential proportions.
But targeting the Gulf nations
Is what? Because their city center was just targeting Mario. Is what? Targeting the cities, the city centers of nations is what? Tehran, downtown Tehran just got blown up. Do you think they really give a rat's ass about what the people of Dubai and Abu Dhabi think? If they thought for a moment that by striking these centers it puts pressure on, you want to see how fragile these Gulf Arab countries are? Look at their city center. This is a war that shouldn't have happened. And, you can say the United Arab Emirates, articulated this, that, and the other thing. No. I'm telling you right now, and you know this, that in the behind-the-scenes discussions they had with Trump and Israel, they said, if you're going to pull the trigger, end it. Win. Kill them. Kill them. Kill them. And the Iranians know this. So you think there's any love lost here? You think the Iranians are saying, oh, those Israelis are our good friends. They really mean us no harm. No, they heard them articulate death to Iran in the United States behind the scenes. So I'm surprised you never see buildings blow behind you, but who knows where this goes. We were talking about the opening hours of the war, and we already see Iran following through on its promise. Now, Russia and China, I can guarantee you, are making phone call after phone call after phone call, or saying, don't as to the energy level. Because I believe the Russian strategy is to let the United States exhaust itself. There's a finite amount of military power that we have, and we're going to blow it all, and then we're going to be sitting there with nothing, and Israel's going to be getting pounded. But you just saw today, it's just the beginning. Again, you don't have to have 40 missiles come in and have the light show. You just got to start taking out critically important structure.
So this is a regional war. If they start striking the city centres of other Gulf nations, okay, that's something I haven't even thought of. What happens next? Because then
it's a war of existential survival. What do you mean what happens next? If you're going to
Officer allies being struck, his aircraft carriers are at risk. That's very different to the 12-day war.
This is not the 12-day war. This is a war of existential survival. Why do people not understand that?
Quite being targeted as we speak as well.
Good. They should all be targeted. They all didn't do enough to stop this war. They all went.
Quite being targeted as we speak as well.
Good. They should all be targeted. They all didn't do enough to stop this war. They all whispered behind the back of Iran. They all wished for this war to take place because they want the regime in Tehran removed. You know this. You know this to be a fact. I know this to be a fact. Hard?
Explosions in Abu Dhabi, but that's, I need more information. Is that at a US base or where exactly? There is no way to speak. There is the likelihood of striking city centers of these Gulf nations. That's not talking about, not asking for personal reasons. I don't want to evacuate live on stream. But the likelihood of striking, because for me I thought that would be, there's going to be a few days before they target city centers of Gulf nations. Is there a possibility, even though it's unlikely, is there a possibility this might happen from the get-go by Iran? Because it is existential for them. And when they're targeting the supreme leader, the president, remember in the Ukraine war, we had a discussion, and a lot of people would say, Putin will not use nuclear weapons unless his life at risk or with his attacks on the Russian let's say, or something they would it's the same here. Iran, everyone thought the lack of striking the city centers of neighbors, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't target Israel, maybe US bases. But this does become existential for them. You're saying there's a possibility even from the get-go that these city centers get targeted as a way to the US and the early?
I'm a military guy. And I imagine military people think the same throughout. Ask yourself why Putin hasn't killed Zelensky. Because Zelensky could have been killed on day one. It's because they don't want to get into a situation where national leaders are part of the target deck. Because once you start targeting national leaders, you eliminate diplomatic possibilities, negotiating possibilities. Israel, the United States are...
That's in Bahrain.
Yeah,
That's Bahrain.
Negotiating possibilities. Israel and the United States are...
That's in Bahrain.
Yeah, possibilities, negotiating possibilities. Israel and the United States are...
That's in Bahrain.
Good. Bahrain could have stopped this war, but they didn't. They're home of the Fifth Fleet. I mean, what do they want? This war started by the United States and Israel trying to kill the supreme leader. Do people understand who the supreme leader is? In the West, we revile him. Oh, he's not a Khamenei, he's this, that. He's the most important religious figure in Iran and the second most important religious figure in the entire Islamic Shia world. And we tried to kill him this morning. Does that not resonate in the thick skulls of people? What just happened? We tried to kill the Iranian president. Do you think for a second that Iran suddenly holds the lives of the chiefs of the United Arab Emirates sancrosanct? We can't touch them. They're the leaders of nations. They just tried to kill the Iranian leadership. What do you expect Iran to do? The nations, and Iran has said this, the nations that facilitate the strike against Iran will pay a price. So I'm not here to tell you how the Iranians are going to target and who they're going to target. I'm here to tell you that all bets are off. This is a war of existential survival.
What's Trump's off-ramp? If they do target city centers of these Gulf nations and the U.S. is in a tricky position, if the decapitation strike or the regime change operation early on to get people on the streets does not work, could Trump get out of this, or he's stuck now till the end?
The end will be when we run out of ammunition. The off-ramp is to save American lives. Because it comes a point, again, in a boxing match, you can go in there, and as long as you got your hands up, you're viable. But when your arms get tired, they've been hitting you in the side, your arms are tired, your hands start to drop, you're going to get knocked out. And so Russia and China are going to be sitting there watching the American hands. They're right about here, and they're going to tell Trump, end it. And we'll find a way to get this thing over, but you got to back out now. You got to end. And it's not going to end in an American victory. It'll end in an American defeat, but it won't be a defeat measured by American casket.
One of my team members just now told me he heard an explosion in the UAE in Abu Dhabi. Just came in now, one of our news team members who's based in Abu Dhabi.
Welcome to
This 16 terabytes portable solid-state drive, which costs over $1,000 on Amazon, is now available.
I even had the quote that it's going to be limited on the Israeli-US side as well, limited strike during negotiations. But we're in full-blown war, and Gulf nations are being targeted as well.
Yeah, because they're parties to conflict. I mean, why don't people understand that? The Gulf Arab states have gotten away for far too long to sit there and play the duplicitous game.
Reports of Iranian missiles targeting USS Lincoln. Everything's being targeted. There is no escalation matter whatsoever. Everything's being targeted.
Welcome to the war.
Can you explain to us USS Lincoln's defense capabilities? And the Armada?
It'll be a layered defense capability. I mean, the Aegis missile defense shield is linked into a satellite architecture up there, and so we have satellites that look for evidence of missile launch. And I'm not going to get into the details, IR or other signals. And then once you get evidence of launch and direction, then you have layers of defense that are out there searching for them. And as the threats come in, you're not going to get to the Lincoln right off the bat. You're going to have to go through layers of defense, to include F-35 fighters. The F-35 radar is designed to actually integrate in with the Aegis radar system. And so, there is a shield up there that is designed to protect. Now, if the Iranians can fire something that avoids detection at launch, and then can have performance characteristics that are not within the parameter norms of Aegis, in theory they can penetrate this air defense and strike the Abraham Lincoln. We'll see what happens. I don't know the technical capabilities of the Iranian systems. I would personally believe that the Abraham Lincoln won't be struck unless you can overwhelm the screen. The United States Navy has been preparing for this kind of fight for a long time. The Aegis system was designed to actually defend against mass Soviet air-launched cruise missile attacks. And so, and it's been upgraded and tinkered with and all that, so we'll see.
That clip of President Donald Trump announcing and confirming operations on Iran. Let's listen to it.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly do it. Again, they wanted to do it, they didn't. And we trust that with
Iranian people.
Again, I just wish it had never gotten to this. The last thing I want to see is an American aircraft carrier hit.
Can't believe we're even talking about it.
I knew we expected war, but I didn't expect it to escalate this quickly.
But the Iranians said so. I mean, they said
They do say a lot of things. They don't always deliver on that. I mean, all sides say a lot of things. You just don't know what's a bluff, negotiating bluff to deter the US from striking Iran versus what they actually need. And it seems what they're saying right now they need. They're responding very differently to the 12-day war. Remember, the 12-day war, we expected a barrage of missiles against Israel. That's what we saw. And a calculated, pre-planned attack at the US base in Qatar. After informing the US, so more of a symbolic strike. What we're seeing right now is just strikes all across the board, and the Houthis joining. The only thing left that hasn't joined is Hezbollah. I think that's the last.
remember, Hezbollah got the crap pounded out of it this morning, so Hezbollah's going to have to recover from that, readjust. But again, as Israeli resources, remember, war is about resources. A significant number of Israeli resources were used to suppress Hezbollah. Those resources now are going to be diverted elsewhere. And if Hezbollah is able to recover, which I believe they will, you're going to see Hezbollah.
Explosives are heard in Jordan. Is there any good air defense systems in those Gulf nations whatsoever? Because it just seems like such a, that's what not only U.S. bases, just the city centers. It just seems like, I'm not a military strategist, but if I was Iran, this is existential for me, striking the city centers of those Gulf nations, which I hope does not happen. But if it does happen, if I was Iran and I'm being struck, the leadership is being killed, the Iran is being struck, why wouldn't it? That's the easiest way to pressure Trump.
Well, it's also the easiest way to pressure the king of Jordan. It's also the easiest way to pressure the sheiks that rule the United Arab Emirates. It's also the easiest way to pressure the king of Saudi Arabia. I mean, these are things that they haven't, the indignation that Saudi Arabia had when Iraq fired Scud missiles that struck downtown Riyadh. I remember that. I was there. How dare they? How dare they? Well, guess what, guys? You just sat back and encouraged the United States and Israel to carry out a decapitation strike against the Iranian government that included trying to kill the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, the number 2 Islamic Shia official in the world, and you expect nothing to happen?
They haven't attacked Saudi yet. So over the course right now are Bahrain, the UAE, Jordan. Is that because of
the moment? Give it a moment.
Or is it because Saudi don't want Saudi to join the war? Because Saudi has a lot more military capabilities than yet.
Saudi has no military capability. What do you mean Saudi has more? What are they going to do? Throw in a couple of F-15s? The United States and Israel have already flooded the market. And you say Saudi comes into the war. Do you understand what that means? That means that we have to open up our war plan, and we have to carve out a sector to give it to a Saudi military that's not up to the task. So we're supposed to come into Iran and suppress using tactics and everything. And now we're going to open it up and say, here, Saudi Arabia, you jump in this war with your totally crap Air Force.
It's got to bother
And
me.
you're going to come in and do what? Screw it up? Saudi Arabia's got nothing to bring to the table. The Iranians are not afraid of the Saudis at all. Iran's got Saudi.
And a lot of people are saying it's all Saudi, even though it's a rival to Iran, they don't want to see Iran fall. Because Iran, while it was a historic rival, it's now being seen more as a deterrent against Israeli expansion. So a lot of these Gulf countries don't want to see the fall.
Well, also remember that the bulk of the Saudi oil fields are in eastern Saudi Arabia, where there's a significant Shia population. you start thinking, you try to kill the number two Shia figure in the world. And this could go south really bad for Saudi Arabia. People talk about people rising up in Iran. Wait till the Shia in eastern Saudi Arabia rise up. Bahrain, majority Shia population. What happens when they go to the streets? And now in the past it was like, well, Iran always supported superficial. When Iran turns the table and launches a decapitation strike against Bahrain, and then a suppression strike, and now the majority Shia population rises up, it beheads all the Sunni bastards who've been ruling them, and says we are now part of Islam. I mean, this thing could go bad all over. That this, this is why this war should never have been fought. It's a stupid war.
You're defining a regional war. We've always talked about this being a regional war. A few proxies being active is not really a regional war. What we're discussing right now, if Iran strikes the city centers, at the last level we are capital Saudi.
What did I tell you? This isn't going to be your grandfather's war. All right?
This is, according to one source, we're getting more information as we speak, but you said it's a matter of time. Minutes later, we're getting the reports of a hit in Riyadh. We don't know what they're striking there. That's what we don't know yet. What their targets are.
I would imagine that
the U.S. bases it together. I don't expect them to do that.
There's U.S. military facilities in all these places that we discussed. So that would be the lead. I don't think the lead thing is take out, Saudi government facilities. I think the lead thing is take out U.S. military installations. Right next to Riyadh is a big air base that we use to fly AWACS out of and refuel our aircraft out of. So they may be targeting that. In Jordan, the biggest air base right now that we're using outside of Israel is the Jordanian air base. And when we say strikes Jordan, I would imagine that air base is being hit as well. But again, if you don't try to kill the supreme leader and not believe that there's going to be consequences for that action.
Wow. Talking about regional wars, Scott, what is Turkey's role in all this?
Again, Turkey, Erdogan is a strategic player, and he needs stability. Again, only amateurs sit back and talk about chaos. Real leaders want stability. And Erdogan is a neighbor of Iran. Erdogan and Turkey and Iran have significant economic interaction. All the people are sitting there going, PJAK, we can't wait for the Kurds to rise up. You know who doesn't want the Kurds to rise up in Iran? Turkey. Because they have their own Kurdish problem. So, Turkey's not dying for this to happen.
Will they sit idle though? Is there a stage where enough's enough? So we've got what started on October 7th is the war in Gaza. Then that expanded to Lebanon. That expanded to Yemen. We've got Syria struck with the decapitation of the Syrian military after Assad's fall. And now we're seeing obviously Qatar was struck with the Hamas delegation. And now we're seeing a full-blown war with Iran, which I remember our early discussions. I'm like, even before the cocktail war, we were like, this is the red line that hopefully we will never cross. Before that red line was Hezbollah. We will cross all lines. There's a stage where our nations will come together and say, this cannot continue. This is becoming a threat to all of us. Not Iran, but Israel's aggression against all those countries. Or is their mindset somewhat completely different? Or do they stand with Israel and they want to see the fall of the Iranian regime? I'm putting all our countries together. So the Gulf nations, they all have different interests. Even within Qatar, Saudi, UAE, they all have different interests when it comes to Iran and the regional powers of Israel.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. I think that the major Gulf Arab countries have made a strategic decision that the path forward that is best for them, stability-wise, because stability is key, especially if you're an oil-producing country. These guys don't want chaos. They want stability. Nobody's going to invest in a country at war.
Here's what a whole home including installation, tap below to check pricing. Affordable water filtration systems from the makers of Leaf Filter. These low-maintenance systems can reduce microplastics, harmful chemicals, scale buildup, and more. Plus, they can be installed in one day. Tap below to check pricing and claim your free water test.
Every shift is covered, and handle last minute replacement instantly.
One last head. Brother Turkey. You know, maybe it's time to introduce the concept of the Zangezur corridor to people. Well, it's a corridor that connects Nakhchivan with the mainstream Azerbaijan territory. There's an Armenian-controlled territory there that borders the Iranian border. What Turkey has been talking about, and then J.D. Vance was just there. Again, you asked Turkey. J.D. Vance was just in the region, meeting with Armenia and Azerbaijan, to talk about the Zangezur corridor. Why would you do that? J.D. Vance knows we were going to attack Iran. J.D. Vance knows it. So he's out doing diplomacy to do what? To create the conditions conducive for the sustainment of this corridor. Iran is against this corridor. This corridor is disruptive to the north-south connectivity that Russia and Iran are looking for. The St. Petersburg to Chabahar rail line, etc. It's also disruptive to China's, new Silk Road. Remember, there's a rail line just opened up from western China into Tehran. And so Turkey has been looking for, this opportunity to create its own presence in the region. The Zangezur corridor allows Turkey to emerge out of Turkey with a land corridor that connects it with Azerbaijan and then flows on into Central Asia. So that's the Turkish grand scheme of things. So now you have to say, is this big war with Iran conducive to that, or does this interfere with that? Turkey is also a country that desires to be a regional energy hub, especially in gas. And a lot of that, of course, is dependent upon Turk Stream and Turkmen oil and gas flowing in through, Russia and former Soviet territories into Turkey and then on into Europe. But Turkey has also gambled on the big oil fields off there, the gas fields off of Israel. It will capture that gas and have it go through Turkey as well. So Turkey's not looking for a decisive break in relations with Israel. Erdogan is playing a very, very delicate game right now. So I think what Turkey's going to do is sit back and monitor the situation and reinforce actions that are the benefit. But again, I just got down to big fundamentals here. Turkey's not looking to sow chaos and anarchy in this region. Turkey's looking to inject stability. And this war does not promote stability. It's the antithesis of that. So I think Turkey would be looking for the end of this, a way to end this conflict sooner rather than later. And I think you see Turkey working in concert with Russia and China to bring an end to this conflict.
And what we've seen smoke come out of the rising from the Al-Dafa airbase in the UAE. I'm not sure if you know, if the producer can check, is US using those bases in the UAE and Qatar itself? Because as far as I understand, F-22 was sent to Israel, they're using the jets from Israel and the aircraft carriers. So those countries that did not allow their bases to be used before.
But you don't have to. The thing is, they were used by the United States. And as we speak, there's certain communications capabilities and intelligence collection capabilities that are still intact. It's still part of the system. So even though you took away an airplane, you haven't eliminated the fact that there's a U.S. military presence on the soil of United Arab Emirates.
One more question on Turkey. We're seeing tension because I know it's a very delicate position that it's in. If we look at what's happening right now in the escalation to the other Gulf nations, striking US bases in those nations, to be clear, as far as we know so far, New launches have been detected, so obviously it's going to continue going on. What would you say the worst case and the best case scenario would be? The best case is this ends relatively soon with some sort of deal. This is all not regime change, even though they're talking about regime change. The whole goal was to pressure Iran to reach some sort of deal that beneficial that Trump called it a win, and he still calls himself peace president, which that ship is on sale. Versus the worst case scenario, how much could this escalate? Could it drag other countries? To what extent? Because I mean, we're at a position now where talking about worst case scenarios seems to be a more logical way of looking at things based on the last few years. And this footage we're playing, by the way, this is insane. These are Gulf nations we're looking at right now. You asked me whether this is a regional war. Not sure what the target is here, but if you can tell me what the target is, whether this is US military facility.
I think it's Bahar. Yeah, I think that's the Bahar base. Bahar, I spent a lot of time in Bahrain when I was weapons inspector. I think the key to this is Iran. Because Iran, as it appears, is hitting an arms switch. And so they are in full-blown war mode of an existential nature. And therefore they don't care about what the United States thinks or what Israel thinks. They're in the business of bringing about the most damage possible, the most harm possible. They're here to hurt America, hurt Israel. And then, we could take a guidance from Vladimir Putin. He is not going to allow the Ukraine conflict to end in a way unless the root causes of that conflict are resolved. Because he doesn't want the war to begin in 5 years or 10 years. When this conflict ends in Ukraine, from the Russian perspective, it's over, finished, done. So now from the Iranian perspective, they just try to kill the supreme leader and president. Do you want to end this conflict in a way that enables them to be in a position to do that again and again? That's what happened with the 12-Day War. It ended, but it didn't solve any of the problems. Israel and the United States are still there sitting, saying we want to hit you. So I think this has to end from the Iranian perspective, either with their defeat or a new reality in the region that defames Israel and has the United States recognizing that it just can't come in and flex its military muscle like it thought it could. That's going to be a hard pill for the United States. I personally believe that Donald Trump's committed political suicide. That it's over for him. His presidency is over.
Why? That's what I'm asking. Why did you do this? This doesn't make any sense for U.S. interests, political and strategic.
Well, there must be an element of desperation there that, a lot, again, I try to stay out of domestic American politics just because it's become so divisive. Because you don't know what's hyperbole and what's reality. But, there's no mainstream economist that thinks that what Trump is doing is helping the American economy. In fact, I think it's leading us to an absolute economic collapse down. And at some point in time, you can have Scott Bessent out there posturing about this, that, and the other thing, but once it's back to reality, the reality is the economy is heading in the wrong direction. Hyperinflation, etc. The same thing with the military. You can have Pete Hegseth here, bench press 350 pounds, but do we have military capacity? Or is it all bluff and bluster? And I think what happened is Trump realized that he had boxed himself into a corner here with his rhetoric. There was no reality to back him up, and he was in desperate need of a Hail Mary play. That if he could,
these glasses automatically turn into sunglasses in bright daylight. All glasses have this tiny flaw, but we fixed it. You see, the lenses inside prescription glasses all have fixed diopters, which work, but only for one.
And emerge victorious and able to continue the presidency. What we're seeing now is that the president is going to lose in the midterms, and that the Democrats are going to be empowered to come at him constitutionally on a whole host of issues. Impeachment will be basically a daily operation of Washington, D.C. And if it loses the Senate, and this war could cause him to lose the Senate and lose it decisively, he not only can be impeached, he could be convicted. This is where we're at right now. I think this president has made a horrible move. J.D. Vance has to be just sitting there getting drunk because he will never be president of the United States. MAGA is finished. MAGA was premised on the notion that we don't do these wars. And yet here we are, needing a war that we're not going to win. So this president, Benjamin Netanyahu now, he warned the United States, if we pull this trigger, we have to win this. We have to get rid of the Iranian regime. It's to be the end of Benjamin Netanyahu. Because if facilities keep blowing up in Tel Aviv, and there's no way to stop it, they can't stop it. And it keeps happening, beyond 12 days, into 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
That's another misconception we're seeing right now. Again, people listen, this is not Israel, this is not Iran. This is Abu Dhabi, we saw Qatar in Australia as well. And we saw Bahrain footage as well. What happens in Iran? We talked about the protests. The odds of Khamenei being out as supreme leader were 20% before the war started, just below 20%. We're at 80% by end of March, end of next month. We're at 80% of whole market people putting their money on this. Instead of just guessing, we're now up to 45% chance. 50-50 that Khamenei will be out by end of next month. Whether he's dead, he's deposed. Where do you stand on this? What do you expect on the protests? Because I know you said that most people support the Iranian regime. I'm sure people dispute that. But we also have to agree that protests were the worst that's ever been since the Iranian regime, since the revolution in 1979.
2009, the Green Revolution put people in the streets. There have been massive protests before. You say the worst ever been, that's because of the Mossad deliberately triggered acts of violence. And they did those acts of violence, and the response.
This is Qatar. Look at this, right? This is where we know that is. That's the base.
I don't know. That doesn't violence, and the response.
This is Qatar. Look at this, right? This is where we know that is. That's the base.
I don't know. That doesn't look like the base.
No, it doesn't. It looks like. I don't know Qatar really well, but that doesn't look like the base either. It looks very close to the city.
Get used to it, because all these Arab nations stood by passively while Israel and the United States blew the crap out of downtown Tehran. And that just is a game changer. So, too bad. So sad, too bad. Shouldn't have done it, shouldn't have allowed it to happen. But, I don't know where we're on,
The protest,
oh yeah, the rules have changed, See, the center of the protests were about democracy. The Iranian president said that he was with the protesters when they first came out. He said, we have to do a better job with the economy. We have to do better. And it was hijacked by the Mossad, hijacked by the monarchists. It became ultra-violent on purpose, so that liars in the West talk about 40,000 dead when there was only 3,000 dead. 3,000 is a lot. The 3,000 dead became because the Mossad made the decision to trigger violence to get a reaction from the regime. The game has changed, just like they're striking Gulf areas. There will be no mass demonstrations in Iran. Now, because the game's changed. Right now, if you go out and protest, you are self-identifying as a monarchist. You're self-identifying as a Mossad agent. And you will be destroyed. The game has changed. So anybody who thought that the Iranian government can sit there and let universities, take over the streets, that's just not going to happen.
But a lot of protesters were saying we need Trump to the reason that protests were escalating because they expected the US to strike Iran. As soon as Trump walked back his comments about striking Iran, the protests died down. I think if the regime, the IRGC, is targeted, if the domestic enforcement group, I don't know what they call it, part of the IRGC group, if those guys are targeted, their bases are targeted, then it will be more difficult to be able to first censor if the ability to censor the internet is also destroyed. It will be more difficult for the Iranian authorities to censor the internet, to stop the help of the internet, but also to crack down on protesters and also start seeing defections within the military. Because now the military
they're going to rally around the government. They're going to rally around the nation. Iran is under attack by Israel. Do you not understand that? Iran is under attack by Israel, the most hated nation in the world, that has committed genocide against the Palestinian people. Iran is the only nation that is constitutionally obligated to support a free and independent Palestinian state. This is part of the Iranian DNA. And in Israel, the butchers of Gaza are attacking Iran, and you expect the Iranian people to say, "Oh, ye supporters of Israel, rise up and you will embrace you as brothers." I dare the Mossad agents to rise up and be slaughtered in the streets. It's a different game right now, Mario. It's totally different. They tried to kill Khamenei. It's over.
But the people, the point was so big that the protesters in January, had people say death to the Khamenei, which didn't happen as often, or didn't happen in previous protests.
And then the next day, the crowd 5 times as big went on the street and said, "Long live Khamenei." Why didn't you sit there and go, "Oh, that's the real voice of the Iranian people"?
There's two voices, and there's
No, there's one voice. There's a whisper, and then there's a voice.
If there is two voices, I don't have the exact numbers, but if there's two voices, what happens then? If the siege started, that focus on domestic security, those guys started, the internet is helped by the authorities, and you've got the voices that are death to Israel, in support of the Supreme Leader, and the others that want death to the Supreme Leader. Isn't that a formula for civil war? Because there doesn't seem to be a plan for someone taking over from the Supreme Leader. As I said earlier, Reza Pahlavi does not have enough domestic support. There's no other opposition leader. The Iranian regime has done a great job over many, many decades to systematically ensure that they are ingrained in all aspects of the economy, and there is no alternative. So for me, that looks like
there's no viable opposition to the Iranian regime inside Iran. There are Mossad cells that have been very effective of trying to be contraindicated to create incidents inside Iran that have been filmed and broadcast out to a massive network of echo chambers, including you. I'm just being honest. You play this crap over and over and over again, and you breathe life into these lies of 10,000, 20,000. It never happened. The reality is so far different. You should have brought on Miranda and Confidential who would give you
I've been to Iran many times. To be clear as well, Iran is very pro-regime. The entire country that has internet, he magically has internet to become a regime mouthpiece. But I like Taiwan. Taiwan multiple times on the show. And that's what the
regime mouthpiece Professor Miranda, is a close personal friend of mine. It's a close personal friend of mine, which means I know his heart, and I know his mind, and I know his motivation. Yes, he is a defender of the Islamic Republic. Let there be no doubt about that. But he is not a liar, and he is not a man who puts out disinformation.
Ranger knows that if you're a maintenance supervisor in a manufacturing facility and your machinery isn't working right, you need to understand
he is a fact-based analyst. You just don't want to hear what he has to say about the support that the regime has amongst the Iranian people because it's counter to the narrative that's being put by the anti-regime people in the West.
I think the anti-regime people say there's no one to support the regime, everyone hates the regime. I think that's false. There's a significant, I don't know what percentage it is, amount of people that love the regime in Iran, who saw these protests to support the regime, but also saw massive protests that can't all be sides, that can't have 10,000 people, 100,000 people in Iran. Significant amount of people that are also against the regime. My position is clear. I hate the regime. I don't like the regime. I'm very clear on that. And the way they treated their people. I'm also very, very, very against the regime change because I think my question to you is that the two groups, how big each one is up for debate. If there is no alternative to the regime, and if Trump is committed to a regime change operation, if it is still against, we consider this a win. My worry is then what? There is no opposition party that can take power. The prince that I had on the show, the Reza Pahlavi I had on the show, doesn't have enough support coming. Then it just seems like the goal is not regime change. The goal, my worry is that the goal is what Israel wants, Iran to end up like Syria. no regime,
Again, you talk about, understand this, again, don't conflate the people that went into the streets on December 28th with anti-regime opposition. The people that went on the streets on December 28th, 29th, 30th were Iranian civilians saying, hey, we're merchantmen, we run the markets, and the real just collapsed. And we are now in a crisis, we're losing our businesses. We need the government to do a better job. Notice what I just said. We need the government to do a better job. They didn't say, death to the government, down with the government, up with the Shah. They said, we need the government because we are the people of Iran. So we are protesting, and in peaceful protest. And the Iranian president came out and said, I am with you. I am with you. We have to do a better job. So all those people that came out, none of them are against the regime. It was only when Mossad came out on December 30th and activated their violent cells. And the Iranians will tell you, if you listen to them, how these violent groups came in and seized control, deliberately attacked demonstrators and security forces, and created this mess about it. And then you have a handful of people come out and say, death to Khomeini, up with the Shah. If they filmed the videotape, sent out on free, on LinkedIn, it's not what the Iranian people believe.
I've just been informed, by the way, that by the way, I'm going to show a video. Don't know what the target is. I'm going to show the video now, but Dubai has a big as well. There is a US base. I'll do that, okay. That's different. Not Dubai. That's very different. Stuff like that is where the US base is located. Dubai is very different. That's why I was a bit worried. So Dubai is not really it. This is the wrong information. It is Abu Dhabi. You should show the footage. And going back to the protest, I got a bit worried when they said Dubai. I didn't expect that. Not really a US base. But going back to what you said right now. My point though is that yes, Mossad is active. Israel's Mossad said they are active. I mean, no one disputes that. But I also think that if there is no domestic support for protests or opposition to the government, the Mossad will not be able to succeed against people on the streets. So I think it's a mix of both. Mossad trying to support the protesters, trying to weaken the siege, but there is people that don't want the regime to get it. But going back to the crux of the question though, Scott, if Israel and Trump want regime change, and you're saying the regime will not fall, then what should we expect to happen? There's two options. How is that going to end?
The United States will run out of military power. The generals already warned the president. We have a finite amount of ammunition. Ammunition doesn't matter how many airplanes we have, how many aircraft we have. We can't drop bombs. It's useless, and then we're done. So what happens is the United States has to withdraw from this fight. And then Israel is left on its own. And then we get into regime change in Israel. And the goal here won't be the destruction of Israel, because I don't think that will be going to happen. But what we're looking at is the disenfranchisement of the object that will lose all credibility. This man was, again, Robert, you saw it at the end of the 12-day war. Did you see the video of this man when he was talking about what was happening? Shaking. He was uncertain for the first time. He said, this got out of control. That's why he called Trump and said, end this conflict, because I don't know what the future of he is. They told the United States, don't pull the trigger unless you guarantee not to. And so the United States has pulled the trigger. If the United States doesn't get the outcome it wants, look, this is early. I mean, we don't know. There could be other things. The United States could flip the script and suddenly everything falls apart in Iran and we have regime change. We're literally in the opening moments of what's supposedly probably going to be a very long, drawn-out affair. But if this doesn't go away, Benjamin Netanyahu is finished as a politician. And with him goes the extreme, wing of Israeli politics, and you might see a more moderate approach by Israel that, because, what gives Israel the ability to act like bullies is being backed up by the United States. But if the United States spins its power, you can't finish the job. It's just sort of left hanging there alone. What's Israel going to do if you don't defeat Iran and Hezbollah is still alive, living, now active on your border. That's an existential threat. What happens if Hamas gets revived because of this? I mean, this could be an absolute, wrestling, flip here. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot of pressure by the United States to finish the job. They're going to pour in a lot of resources, but if they don't finish it and they expend those resources, there's no plan B, and that's where Russia, China, and Turkey are going to come in and be looking for an offering. Before it becomes...
If you cut that out, I'll stop speaking, I apologize. But always a pleasure. We spoke when the Cold War was kicking off, and we can begin now in a significantly, the worst war that we're seeing, the regional war that we're seeing. So I appreciate you giving us time. I hope to have you again, and we will keep sending updates. And appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Good luck. We're literally in the opening moments of what's supposedly probably going to be a very long, drawn-out affair. But if this doesn't go away, Benjamin Netanyahu is finished as a politician. And with him goes the extreme, wing of Israeli politics. And you might see a more moderate approach by Israel that, because, what gives Israel the ability to act like glory is being backed up by the United States. But if the United States spends its power and can't finish the job, it's just sort of left hanging there alone. What's Israel going to do if you don't defeat Iran and Hezbollah is still alive, living, now active on your border? That's an existential threat. What happens if Hamas gets revived because of this? I mean, this could be an absolute, wrestling, flip here. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot of pressure by the United States to finish the job. They're going to pour in a lot of resources, but if they don't finish it and they expend those resources, there's no plan B, and that's where Russia, China, and Turkey are going to come in and be looking for an offering. Before it becomes...
If you cut that out, I'll stop speaking, I apologize. But always a pleasure. We spoke when the Cold War was kicking off, and we can begin now in a significantly, the worst war.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just like thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform.
Using something called adversarial noise.
To fuse AI models and Benjamin replicating track. If you've been here before, you may...
obviously an ongoing project that encodes music files with meanings that AI hears, but humans cannot. It effectively makes instrument and genre classifiers completely confused, and that makes the AI hear complete and utter nonsense. The whole point of that project was to develop something that would prevent AI companies from scraping my and others' albums and reselling the data as an AI music service. And so far, the algorithm is working very well and improving. And the reason I develop things like this is because the people that we've elected to protect our intellectual property and our privacy rights aren't doing their jobs. So if we want any sort of defense from this, we need to roll up our sleeves and use technology to defend ourselves. Sometimes videos like this are controversial because adversarial noise attacks have the potential of becoming a pretty big, expensive problem for the AI industry, especially since the vast majority of that industry is just rapidly feature hunting while building on top of pre-existing AI models that just work. For example, you can't ask an AI model how exactly it recognizes a face because it doesn't have a human brain or eyes, nor is it equipped with a consciousness-based intelligence capable of actually recognizing a person. This black box problem isn't really a problem when an AI model manages to generate an image or a song or to recognize a license plate. It just works. But when somebody introduces an attack that prevents the model from working, you can't just open it up and fix a few things. A few years ago, something called Nightshade, some tech-savvy artists attempted to poison pill their artwork by introducing an invisible noise to the image that confused models trained for image generators. And it worked incredibly well at first. Luckily for generative AI companies, they figured out that by adding some blur to the images and then using another AI algorithm to sharpen those images, they could remove the noise. That's not exactly a great solution or a cure for the problem. It's more of an advantage, because now training image models takes longer and costs more due to the additions to the data processing workflow. And that particular advantage is going to be great for optical character recognition used by license plate readers, because the whole point of the technology is accurately outputting text from an image, not generating abstract license plate photos. So with that being said, here's what we're going to be doing here. License plate database, and they make 1,000 identical traffic images of plates, super improved to recall. If the license plate isn't even detected at all by both models, meaning that it doesn't even see the plate or rectangle itself, that gets moved to Class A. If the license plate was detected in both models, but it got the plate information wrong, that moves to Class B. Then, if either model detects and reads it correctly, it goes to Class C, which is a control. Then they use a whole lot of times. They a whole lot of different license plates and create a robust data set to train a new model whose job is to generate abstract, invisible license plate overlay patterns that cannot be detected by humans, but make license plate recognition systems utterly shit fat. So I've got the processing application up here on GitHub. If I want to install processing, it's pretty easy to use, and everything's kind of explained in the code itself. I want to configure everything correctly. I have a bunch of images like this, where you will have tiny bits of noise on your plate. Some will be more or less conspicuous than others. Now you need to test those images, and I created a Python improvement rep to do this. So once the library is utilizing the GPU are installed and you run the script, it will open up a little dialog in the folder. It will go through every single image in the folder, and then it will create a new folder and build up images, which will tell you where to detect the license plate, if it's red, and a confidence zone. We have Crew 5000, the original, we have Moon 5000, the preserve, we have PDQ 5009, 9005400, Doom 5000, Coon 5U, and then what I'm really interested in are some of these it didn't detect a plate at all. Somehow the noise pattern actually perturbed the image segmentation model detecting a rectangle on the vehicle, and if we figure out what pattern is breaking the image segmentation, like detecting the license plate itself, then it's possible that you could just have a license plate holder that doesn't obfuscate the plate at all, and that can make it much less likely to be read by the AI and the license plate readers. So in that little Python in here also, I'll put all the data into a CSV file just so you can resolve the data in front of you at once. It was time to test this in the real world against these programs. I thought it would be fun to print out the noise on transparent adhesive sheets for like 5,000 license plates. This is just an easy way to test the patterns, and definitely not something you would actually want to put on your car and drive on public roadways unless you miss your friends in prison.
Hey, officer, it's just a little mud from on off-road.
12 miles per hour, definitely throwing these cameras softball. Let's do one at congested parking lot speeds. I mean, that's like essentially holding text right up to the camera. And that looks like a normal license plate. Some of these ALPR models are not as visually interesting as others, so rather than just showing the dash terminal scrolling text, we'll stick with the footage of the ones where I could pump live video and get real-time results. So with no adversarial, it's just the raw license plate, it detected proof by best. This is adversarial was layer A. And it's definitely pretty confused, and it doesn't seem to pass the confidence threshold to even register a plate at all. I tried to ban one plate because it's a style that hasn't been used in like 30 or 40 years, and it has red text, and it's just very different than the one they were trying to attack initially with the black noise. And it definitely does confuse it quite a bit. Alright, this is the old V8. Not all of them passed the test, which was completely expected, but a lot of them did, and I'm reasonably confident that if I just screen printed some of these on a plate and slapped it on my vehicle, I'd be able to track the camera in. And again, these are probably not screenable anyway, and are just training data for the final model, which will ideally be completely invisible to the human eye and not obstruct the license plate in any perceivable way. When I made the video about Harmony Cloak and when I introduced Voiceify, my AI music defense algorithm, I got inundated by people asking for a user-friendly app or website where they could use it on their own music. I got VCs wanting to invest in it and companies wanting to exclusively own it. And I'm flattered, if not surprised, by that level of enthusiasm. And it's actually really inspiring. But this channel is a non-profit organization that allows me to do independent research on whatever it is that I feel like researching and then share those ideas for free publicly. And it's my dream job. And that same set of principles applies to this project. In Greek mythology, there's this venomous multi-headed serpent that lives in the swamps that goes by the name of the Armenian Hydra. And any time that somebody tried to slay this monster by cutting off one of its heads, they would see two heads grow back in its place instantly. And this monster caused many generations to live in fear until one very powerful and brave man was tasked with destroying it. Donald J. Trump, or Hercules. Or John Wick, I'm not really sure. If projects like this have any hope of putting a dent in things technologically or inspiring legislation to further protect people's IP, first place instantly. And this monster goes by the name of the Armenian Hydra. And any time that somebody tried to slay this monster by cutting off one of its heads, they would see two heads grow back in its place instantly. And this monster caused many generations to live in fear until one very powerful and brave man was tasked with destroying it. Donald J. Trump, or Hercules. Or John Wick, I'm not really sure. If projects like this have any hope of putting a dent in things technologically or inspiring legislation to further protect people's IP or privacy, then you're going to need a whole lot of people working creatively on solutions and sharing that information with one another. And that way, if AI companies figure out a way around the defensive technology, two more will pop up in its place. And it's worth pointing out that I have absolutely no problem with my license plate being identifiable or readable by law enforcement officers, or even the person driving behind me. I don't even have a problem with police using license plate readers mounted on their vehicles. Driving a 2-ton vehicle that is capable of going well over 100 miles per hour on a public roadway or a parking lot is a pretty big responsibility and privilege.
Working across teams is tough, but Asana helps you handle it. That's because Asana is where humans and AI coordinate work together. AI can spot roadblocks and assign work in a snap, so everything and everyone stays on track. That's how work gets handled. That's Asana. Visit us at asana.com. That's ASANA.com.
Anywhere in the United States, if law enforcement wants to track your location via phone for a prolonged period or even hang you beyond a single cell phone tower, they are required to have a good reason for it, and an elected judge needs to agree that it's a good enough reason by granting them a warrant. This was argued, debated, and decided by the Supreme Court in a landmark ruling for the 2018 case Carpenter v. United States.
Time-stamped data provides an intimate window into a person's life, revealing not only his particular movements, but through them his familial, political, professional, religious, and sexual associations. These locations Inflation Records, quote, hold for many Americans the privacy of life.
So it would be reasonable to assume that tracking someone's location with AI without a warrant would be a violation of their Fourth Amendment right. Right? Well, that has not been ruled on yet. And if they agree that it's a constitutional violation, they'll be leaving Flock Safety Unicorn out of its $8 billion stable and shooting it right in the head. And considering the combined $92 million lobbying effort of Flock Safety and the primary investor, maybe it's not so confusing why nobody will straighten this whole constitutional rights thing out. My point that's taking forever to get to is, I have no idea if using adversarial rules to confuse AI tracking systems is legal or not in your state. For this reason, if you are inspired by this video or this information, I would advise and ask that you use that inspiration to research this type of technology. And I would not advise or ask that you immediately screen print or placing that sticker on your license plate, because you very well could be the one that they make an example out of. I want to talk today about my love affair with this video sponsor, my Patreon members, because without them, I would not be able to tell you that this video would have been a perfect fit for the non-stop sewage-type stream of emails I get trying to get you to talk about services like Delete Me or Incogni, which charge you around $100-ish per year to remove your information from a few data brokers. The problem with these data protection services is that there is no complete data protection service because there is no complete list of data brokers for them to contact. And that doesn't even matter because in the U.S., a data broker is only required to stop displaying data on their servers. So when they sell or license that data elsewhere, which is kind of the point of being a broker of data, your data will just be able to be displayed again. In fact, Incogni is owned by Norton Security or NordVPN, whose marketing affiliates have repeatedly sent me sponsorship offers with key points to describe them as hack-proof, despite having hacked in a data breach that they didn't disclose to their users for a year and a half after it was discovered. By the way, Reject Convenience made an excellent video essay on this that I recommend on link below. Everywhere in the European Union, your data privacy is treated and recognized as a fundamental human right. Their general data protection regulation requires you to explicitly opt in before your personal data can be logged or collected. And this provides the framework for similar protections in the UK, Japan, Brazil, Argentina, Switzerland, South Korea, Canada, India, even China, and so on. And in the majority of these countries, these protections are extraterritorial, meaning that even though Google or Facebook are American companies or services, they'll need to become and remain compliant to those rules if they want to continue to do business in those countries. There is no reasonable need to try and disrupt license plate readers in these places because your health information, your social media activity, your facial expressions and sentiment while standing in line at Walmart aren't being bundled with them and then leased to law enforcement. Since the boom of the internet in the 1990s, the dangers of personal data brokerage became very apparent to just about all of us. Everyone from sociologists to data scientists to concerned taxpayers begged legislators to protect them. And even after stolen data was used to manipulate and subvert democracy in 2016, another decade passed without any meaningful protection from the federal government. So yeah, I guess we'll just DIY. Hey, video editing here. If you're a law enforcement officer, or if you work for a law enforcement agency, or if you're associated or aligned with them, and if you've lasted up to this point in this video, think I have been rather blunt about my feelings, but I also do not want to make a video that is solution-oriented. A big thing that inspired, or I guess frustrated me into making this video was coming across the social media video of the Fox CEO talking about Flock Nova being one click to one case solved. Because every single person who has worked in law enforcement that I have met in my personal life has been an incredibly dedicated hard worker who I feel has been undertrained and underpaid. And from my perspective, in industries that I've worked in, hearing a tech CEO make your work look easy for their own personal and financial gain pisses me off. I understand that you're interested in this technology because you want your community to be safer, and I think that that's a noble reason. I'm going to write a brief open letter/proposal about how your law enforcement agency could use technology like this in a way that is customizable, upgradable, more secure, and most importantly, built on a framework that is scaled for compatibility with admissible trial evidence. And furthermore, if you have any technical questions about things that you saw in this video, reach out via email, and I'm happy to try and answer them or point you in the direction of someone can. While it may not seem like it, I am actually aligned with your ability to safely reduce crime. It's just that I want the most effective forensic technology to be owned by the justice system, not venture capital firms. This video took quite a few turns, and hopefully some of you learned something and found it meaningful. It was also pretty expensive, between hardware from government auctions, to components, to ALPR licenses, but I'll tell you what, this video would have been impossible to make without my Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to them. And if you want to see more content like this, as well as have access to ultrasonic bird recordings and tons of other sciencey and weird field recordings and audio assets on unreleased music, or our Discord server full of music and science dorks, or our monthly songwriting challenge, then please join us. It's as little as $1. Thanks for watching. Be creative.
Say quite clearly that it is about reading them. And by the way, it's also I personally am doing well.
Alright, we are live. Should I ask you how you're doing?
Well, I personally am doing well, but obviously the news is concerning, to put it mildly. Concerning but predictable, and by the way predicted. I mean, right at the time of the June board, and I'm sorry to repeat this all the time, but I think we need to always keep this back in mind. When the June 2025 war ended after 12 days, we said that there would be another attack, and it was the certainty that it would come. I actually thought it would come before the end of 2025, whether it comes in the first days, the last day of COVID.
Yeah, we were also the first, if not one of the first two to recognize this was all about regime change. I mean, we did bad, we had videos going back almost a year ago saying that this has nothing to do with uranium enrichment or protests, anything like that. No, it was about regime change. It was always, that's how we did it.
Absolutely, straightforward. He said quite clearly that it is about regime change. And by the way, there's lots of people around the world too. An interesting comment from Medvedev today. Interesting not because it's saying anything that we haven't been saying for the last year or so, but Medvedev is coming out saying that the negotiations will recover, that there was no reality to them, that the attack was always planned. We have reports in the Russian media that the plan for this attack began months ago. It was only a question of the timing of the attack that was in question. It's again a further sign. This is a detail, but it's an important detail, and what we need to remember that within the Russian leadership there is a strong faction, and Medvedev is clearly signaling that he is one of the people in that faction who not only doesn't trust Donald Trump, but who doesn't believe that Donald Trump is really serious about any kind of negotiations at all, be them between Russia, between the United States and Iran, or between the United States and Russia.
Yeah, I've been rereading that Medvedev post on X and on Telegram. Sometimes I think he's talking about Russia and not Iran. He's mentioning the negotiations as being just clear.
Yeah.
Is he not only talking about Iran, he's also talking about Russia?
Yeah, it is clear. He's being intentionally ambiguous about this, and he sneeringly refers to Trump as the peacemaker. And he doesn't believe that Trump is any sort of peacemaker. This is making that very clear before, and this is making it very clear again.
Well, the Russians obviously are looking on, and they're drawing their own conclusions.
Yes.
The Chinese, I'm sure, are looking on, and they're drawing their conclusions as well.
Yes.
The whole world is drawing their conclusions from all of this. Weeks of months of negotiations.
Yes.
Once again, we were heading into technical talks, just like last time. Just like the first round, technical talks, they launched the strike.
Yes.
Technical talks, about the end of the technical talks, they launched the strike.
Yes.
So,
directly after the Iranian media said that there was no need to conduct an attack at this time, that there was progress to be made in negotiations. The difference this time is that the Iranians were clearly much better prepared for it than they were in June. So this is why so far we're not getting reports of scores of Iranian officials being killed. or Pezeshkian and Khamenei being killed or released, but at least not for them.
Well, that was the goal of the strike. The first couple of waves of strikes into Iran. There's going to be more strikes in Iran and the United States, Israel. Trump himself did not get the fact that this is about decapitating the Iranian government, the military, the administrative government. They want to get rid of all of it.
Yeah.
Because they're going straight after the leadership. It's that simple.
Now, the big question, the two big questions is, can Iran withstand this blow? I mean, they're hitting back at the moment, and they're hitting back exactly as they say, against American bases all across the Middle East. They've even attacked American bases in Saudi Arabia, but in Qatar, in Bahrain, in all of these places. So the Iranians are doing that. They are much more reactive, much more aggressively reactive than they were during June, after the June attack, when they were clearly getting by surprise. So, but can they withstand this blow? We don't know how long it will continue for. It cannot continue indefinitely. And I think this is a universal consensus that the United States and Israel lack the depth of resources to continue this over many weeks. So can Iran hold together over those weeks? That's one request. The other big question is, if they do, what happens next? What does the United States do? What does Israel do? And basically, what does Trump do? And how does he sell this to the American people, who, as you pointed out recently in another program that you did in many places, the American people do not support this operation. They're not interested in another regime change operation in the Middle East. They were assured by Trump during the 2024 campaign that there would never be anything like that happening.
Well, how many missiles does you think Iran has? I think that's an interesting question that a lot of people are trying to figure out. That will dictate how long they can go at this. I mean, 10,000, 50,000? What do you think? I mean,
well, I have no idea. I'm not going to try and guess, because I truly, generally don't know. They use arguably a lot of missiles back in June. There are stories that they've replaced them. Is that possible? There's also the absolutely secondary question of whether they might get missiles from third parties. Not maybe Russia and China, but maybe Russia and China. What about Pakistan, with which Iran has very, very close relations, and which, for its own reasons, has reasons at this particular time to be hostile to this operation. So this is an unknown question. What we can say, we don't know how deep Iran's missile resources are, or how effective Israel and America's ability to destroy missiles on the ground can be. But what we can say is that the US itself does not have an unlimited stockpile of missiles, either air defense missiles, where we're told that the cover is practically bare, and we are seeing that. We're seeing missiles hitting American bases, Iranian missiles hitting American bases. So that suggests that air defense of these bases at the moment is thin, and Iranian missiles will also be targeting and hitting targets in Israel itself. And in terms of defensive missiles, Tomahawks and Javelin missiles, well, the Tomahawks, apparently the US has about 600 to 800 Tomahawks available close to Iran at the present time. Maybe there are more, maybe there are less, maybe there are ground launchers in Israel. That are so frankly, I've never heard of any Tomahawk ground launchers. 600 to 800 missiles is not looking to me anywhere near enough to inflict significant damage, or at least critical damage, on a country the size of Iran. So it's a question of who has the deeper resources, and about uranium resources, I simply don't have the answers to that question. And anybody outside Iran could pretend to be Iran if it's not telling the truth.
Well, I think Trump laid out in his speech or statement, I don't know, is that a live speech or recorded speech or statement? I'm not quite sure. About this 8-minute declaration of war. Let's call it a declaration of war.
Absolutely. I don't know, but I'm going to make a guess it's pre-recorded. The word is another one later, which reinforces to you that this is pre-recorded.
Yeah. But to Trump laid it all out, we basically said, look, we're going to launch a big operation, a massive operation. We're going to take out the Navy, we're going to take out the leadership, we're going to take out the military facilities. It's going to be a big operation, bombs are going to drop everywhere, he said. And then he called on the people of Iran to rise up. Rise up against the government. He called on the military of Iran to drop their weapons and rise up against the government, and you will have immunity, I believe he said. He's calling, basically, we're going to bomb everything. We're going to try decapitation strikes, but we want the people, as all this chaos is unfolding, we want the people to rise up and initiate the regime change. I think that is the goal for the next couple of weeks, to try and get the people to overthrow the government, the military, or some forces in Iran to overthrow the government. And we don't know, we've been saying this over many videos, you pointed this out, we don't know what infiltration there is from the United States, Israel, in Iran, perhaps in order to try and get certain elements within the military or the administrative government to try and remove the government.
Well, that's the big answer. And to say it straightforwardly, unless that happens, it's difficult to see how this operation can succeed. So, given that the Americans and the Israelis are proceeding with this operation, perhaps they have reasons to think that there are elements within the Iranian military and security system that will act in this way. It must be said that for the moment, and we're at the very beginning of this, there is no sign of that. But who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. Tonight is going to be very important. One would assume that tonight would be the moment when, if there is going to be a move by dissident rebel forces within Iran, they will act, but so far there's no sign of it.
Yeah, tonight's going to be critical. This weekend, we'll see a preemptive attack. Don't confuse it with unprovoked full-scale invasion. We all talk about unprovoked full-scale invasion, nonsense. We saw a lot of restraint in the whole Ukrainian conflict, especially the opening of the Ukrainian conflict. What we're seeing now is full-scale. Full-scale unprovoked, right? They're going after the leadership, they're going after the military facilities, they're going to go after the communication, they're going to go after all of it. It's something that Russia did not do.
No,
I think it needs to be pointed out.
Absolutely, it has to be. We have 7 long years of negotiations. We have the Minsk Agreement, which was signed by the Ukrainians, and also signed by the Germans and the French, and which was then ratified in the Security Council resolution, which everybody quietly accepts Ukraine never intended to implement, and which the Germans and the French knew Ukraine was not going to implement. So the Russians made enormous efforts to try and achieve a diplomatic resolution of the crisis, and the negotiations that end right up until the very last moment. This time it's completely different. There were negotiations, the Omani media say that they were making progress, the Iranians made proposals which in any rational world could have been taken forward. They were making proposals about nuclear enrichment, which, as I said, seem to me, seem to most people, I think, around the world, entirely sensible proposals. But the United States and Israel were not interested because their objective was and has always been regime change.
Matthew says, how bad is this going to get? Global conflict?
Well, it could get very bad. This is the problem, because of course let's go back and discuss what will happen if in a week, in 2 weeks' time, in a month, Iran is still standing and still hitting targets in Israel and in the United States, across the Middle East, not the United States. What then do Israel and the United States do? What do the Iranians want in return in order to stop? There is no clear answers to these questions. What are the long-term Iranian objectives? Do they want the United States to pull its forces out of the Middle East? An incredible demand. But how do the Israelis respond if their country comes under attack, if their air defense system has basically broken down, and if there is no regime change in Iran? This is incredibly dangerous.
Let's do the reverse, Alexander. What if the United States takes out the Ayatollah, the religious? We're not talking Maduro here.
No.
We're talking the supreme leader, religious Shia leader. What happens then?
Well, so what happens if Iran's government collapses? The government that would replace it, whatever government did replace it, it would lack legitimacy because it would have been imposed by external forces, by the United States and Israel. They might try and package it as an act of liberation. It might be something that some people in Iran would accept, but many others would not, especially given, as Iran say, that this is a religiously based state. So we can very easily see incredible chaos, incredible violence, massive instability in Iran and the regions that make up Iran, with every possibility that this could spill over into the broader Middle East. There is no reason to think, for example, that it might not start to affect the Arab states of the Gulf, all of which have significant Shia communities, and in the case of Bahrain, the Shia majority.
What was the population of Syria when they tried to do the regime change Obama? And then we got huge migrant crisis in Europe. What was the population of Syria back then? I visited Iran and talked about 92 million people.
92 million people. I think in East Syria, it used to be 25 million, but I think it was more than that, a lot more than that by then. But I agree. The migration flows, the refugee flows, if you prefer to use that word, are potentially going to be enormous. And where will they go? Sorry?
25 million Saturday.
Where will they go? There's only one place they will go. Obviously, they will go to Europe.
Yeah. All right. Frank Mercer is up to 109 so it wasn't my fault. And I need to say my words. I'm so sorry for my friends. As America destroys their country on top of Pakistan and Afghanistan being at war. Nancy Graham won. What do you make of the time? Go ahead.
I mean, Lindsey Graham is really president.
The neocons always win. The neocons always get their way. We've been saying this for how long now? Every video, we always end our videos now with one sentence: neocons always get their way, and they're never held accountable for anything. They get promoted.
I've never known the neocons to fail to go to war that they have demanded. Sooner or later, it all ends.
Yeah. I was going to ask, what do you make of the timing of the Afghanistan-Pakistan conflict?
This is very interesting, very extraordinary. The Pakistan played a massive role over decades in establishing the government, the Taliban government in Afghanistan. I mean, the Taliban government was, to a great extent, Pakistan's creation. And we've seen that instead of the Taliban becoming, as the Pakistanis expected, a satellite of Pakistan, the Taliban have instead moved towards hostility and antagonism to Pakistan. Now, is this connected to these events in Iran? I
down to test. And I'll tell you why. I mean, the Taliban itself is apparently deeply divided between a religious leadership in Kandahar, which is very hard line, and a less hardline leadership called people who run ministries in Kabul. I can't see either of these two groups working on behalf of the Americans in this conflict. Because Pakistan, just to repeat again, has tended to be fairly closely aligned with Iran. Pakistan, however, has also had fairly good relations with the United States. My sense is, for the moment, that the Pakistan-Afghanistan conflict is separate from this one. I may be wrong, who's to say? The Americans do get involved in all sorts of things. They may have created this conflict in order to cause a distraction for Pakistan. But bear in mind, Taliban are not particularly good terms with Iran, Pakistan. It's complicated. We mustn't assume that the Americans are able to orchestrate every conflict in every place in the world.
Right. Haruko says, what a shame, insane, crazy, is it predictable? No.
No, I believe that.
Flat Yarrow says they also attacked the Ayatollah of Iraq and Angola. Howland says, as quickly said, the worst thing that can happen to a country losing of sovereignty, so America has none of it and is acting as avatar for Israel.
He was more people in America against that because on whose behalf is this war being fought? Is Iran attacking the United States? Not at this time. Iran is negotiating with the United States. It doesn't take very long to see which country feels itself in genuine conflict with Iran. In fact, Netanyahu has been talking about Iran being a threat to Israel for decades. Even though up to now, Iran has taken no overt action. It has taken no actual, proactive action to attack Israel. It has responded when it itself has been attacked, but it has never itself proactively attacked Israel at this time.
Says, can you see China and Russia provide direct support even in a defensive capacity with the planes separate? I can't see how they can afford them to fail.
I think they will do everything they can short of these things to prevent Iran falling. But this is the key thing to understand. It's not the military attack on Iran that is the danger. Iran is a big country, 90 million people, an enormous territory, a big industrial base. If this is simply a conflict of arms, then Iran should be able to see it off. But the question is, how internally stable is Iran? And that's the big uncertainty, and the Chinese and the Russians can only do so much there.
Reapers actually says multiple children were killed in a school in southern Iran. GGO Farms says, at some point, we have to be willing to call out Jewish power in the West. I'm tired of hearing about anti-Semitism while my country is a proxy for Israel along with Iran.
And more people are anti-Semitic.
Kensha says, Israel and America heavily rely on the Air Force to attack Iran, so Iran should focus on taking out the Air Force tanker fleet, take out their logistic capability.
Many people are saying this, but one thing I'm not going to do is give you evidence and advice on how to conduct military operations. That's absolutely not my job. And besides, I'm not the person to discuss those things. As I've said many times, military operations is not my thing.
Nicholas, as I said, both Putin and Medvedev speak the same. Recently, they know that if Iran falls, Russia is next. But President Putin needs to officially cut ties.
I think this is, I think that people should, I think that, by the way, the idea that if Iran falls, Russia falls, I think that's simply wrong. And I think people need to understand that these are two completely different countries. the Russian economy operates in a completely different scale and technological level from Iran's. Russian society is far more homogeneous and far united, and Russia is the world's leading nuclear power. It is wrong to say that Iran falls, Russia falls. What is true is if Iran falls, Russia and China have a very big headache because there's going to be lots of trouble and chaos in Central Asia, and it is certainly there for the development of the race.
That's the point. Nico says American supports war, the United States will reach on everything. These people are wrong with the British Army. They haven't suffered at all.
Well, I mean, Union Post tell a completely different story. Most Americans do not support this war, are hostile to it, and the Iranian race is splitting.
Iranian officials in Pakistan military has close ties to Western security services. They would never help Iran with terrorism. People even claim that Pakistan would arm Turkey with nukes if the time comes, which is laughable.
Well, I do that absolutely. And Pakistan has had, and does continue to have,